Hi everyone, myself Dr. M. Lakshmi Prasad, working as an Associate Professor in the Department of Data Science in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So in this video, I'm going to discuss about what are the various sources of primary data. So before going to see that, what is the purpose of collection of data? So the process of semantic gathering of the data for a particular purpose from various sources that has been systematically observed, recorded and organized, right? So the process of systematic gathering of the data for a particular purpose from various sources. So which may be in the form of observed one or record one or organized one. And this is the first statistical study step. So where there are several ways of collecting data here. So the choice of procedures so usually depends on the objectives and design of the study and the availability of the time, money and personnel. So these things are very important before going to collect the data. So this is the first step of statistical study, and there are several ways of collecting the data. In previous video I discussed so many steps, however what are the different ways of collecting the data, and then there are so many procedures also available, depends on the objectives as well as the design of the study. So the availability of the time as well as money and also very important. And next one in this slide I'm going to discuss about the purpose of data collection. So the main purpose of data collection will be to obtain the information. So what are the different ways, so where I can able to collect the information, so that and all I have to know. That is the main purpose of this one. And then keep on record. So keep on record is also very thing. So what is the information I'm collecting, so that can also be recorded in the form of videos or not, whatever it may be. And then in order to make the decisions about the important issues, right? So this is the also main important thing. So now in order to make the decisions about the very important things that is going on happen in the real world, and then in order to pass the information to on others also, and then the passing of information can also be very important, and then for research study. So this is the very important step. So in order to conduct a research, so definitely you have to collect the data from the multiple sources, right? And next slide. So the sources of the data is going to be classified into two types. So first one is external data and second one is internal data. So again, so this external data is going to be classified into two types. So first one is primary data and then second one is secondary data. Again, another kind of another source of data will be internal one. So when comes to this primary data, so the primary data will be the data what I am getting from the documents, and then the data what I am going to get from creative works, and the data where I'm going to get from interviews as well as man-made material things, and then surveys. Like this, I can able these and all the data what I'm coming from, that should be considered as a primary data here. Similarly, when it comes to secondary data, so the secondary data will be unpublished thesis, and then dissertations, and then the manuscript, and then books, and then journals. So they already the data may able to already get from the books and journals, already it is there. So that why it is going to be treated as the secondary data, right? So the sources of data is going to be categorized into 2 days. First one is external data and second one is internal data. Again, this external data is going to be classified into two types. So first one is primary data and second one is the secondary data. So the primary data is nothing but the documents as well as creative works as well as interviews, man-made material things, and then surveys. And then secondary data, so the secondary data will be unpublished thesis and dissertations, manuscript, and then books and journals. So these are all considered as the sources of the data. So let me explain what are the differences between internal and external sources of the data here. So the internal sources of the data will be on left side and the external sources of the data will be on the right side. So when it comes to internal sources of the data, so the many institutions and departments have the information about the regular functions for their own internal purpose. So this one I'm going to consider as a internal source of the data. Similarly, when those information are used in any survey is called internal source of the data. Example, social welfare society. So the many institutions and departments have information, right, about the regular functions and all, and then own internal process and all. So when those information going to be used in any kind of survey at the time, so this one can be considered as a internal source of data. So example, social welfare society. And comes to external sources of data. So when the information is collected from outside agencies, so apart from not only from internal, suppose if the data is going to be collected from outside agencies or third party services, that one is going to be called as external sources of data. Such types of data are either primary source or it may be a secondary source. So what are the data I'm getting from outside agencies? It may be either primary as well as the secondary also. Then this type of information which can be collected by census or by sampling method, which is done through conducting survey, right? So that and all will be considered as an external source of the data here, right? So the major differences between internal and external sources of the data will be many institutions and departments have information about their regular functions and then for own internal purpose and all. So whenever those information are used in any survey, that one is going to be considered as internal source of data. And similarly, external source of the data. So example of internal source of data will be social welfare society. And then when it comes to external source of data, so whenever the information is going to be collected from outside agencies are going to be considered as external source of data. So some of such types of data which may be either primary one or it may be a secondary one. Sometimes some agency may able to use primary data as well, and some other applications the primary outside agencies or third party services can also give information about the secondary data. So this type of information which can be collected by census and sampling methods by conducting survey. So when let's see about what is the primary data. So how I'm going to get this and all we'll see now. So very first one is that so the data collected by investigator from a personal experimental studies for a specific research goal is going to be called as primary data. So the data which is going to be collected by an investigator from a personal experimental studies for a specific research goal, that kind of data will be treated as a primary data. And the data which is going to be collected especially for a research project, that is also considered as a primary data. So this primary data can also be used whenever secondary data is unavailable and inappropriate, right? And the data which is going to be collected from the primary source will be considered as a unique and then original and then reliable and accurate in nature. So this is the data, the primary data. That means that it should be unique one, original one, reliable one, and then accurate one. So the primary data that have not been changed or altered by human beings. So therefore, its availability is greater than is its secondary data here. So the data which is going to be collected by an individual from an experimental purposes or experimental studies for a specific research goal, that kind of data will be considered as a primary data. So this data is going to be especially collected for a research project mainly. So those who are going to do that, and whenever the secondary data is unavailable and inappropriate, so then the primary data plays a major role here. And then the data is going to be unique one and then original one, reliable one, accurate in nature also. The primary data that have not been changed or altered by an human beings is should be more greater than the secondary data. Let's see the differences between primary data and then secondary data. So what are the advantages of primary data, and then what are the disadvantages of primary data? Let it be. So when it comes to merits, so the primary data, the targeted issues or addresses, and this is the very first advantage. So the targeted issues are addressed clearly, so that is the major advantage in primary data. And then the data interpretation is also better when it comes, if I'm going to take primary data, that is another advantage what we're having. And then the high accuracy of the data is also another advantage here. And then the address as specific research issues, and then greater control. So these and all will be the various advantages of the primary data here. So the advantages of primary data will be targeted issues are properly addressed, as well as specific research issues also properly addressed, and then data interpretation is going to be very better one, and then the data is also having high accuracy, and then it is having greater control also. And similarly, when it comes to disadvantages or demerits of primary data, so the cost will be more, and then when if I'm going to consider the primary data, and then it should be also the time consuming one, and more number of resources also required. And the next disadvantage is that inaccurate feedback, and then require lot of skill with the labor. So these are the various disadvantages of the primary data, right? So if I take the primary data, there may be some demerits as well as the merits also. So the merits will be the targeted issues are going to be addressed properly, and data interpretation is going to be better, and then high accuracy of the data, and then able to address the specific research issues, as well as greater control. Similarly, the disadvantage will be the cost will be evaluated. It should be very high, and then it should be a very time-consuming process, and then more number of resources are required also, and then inaccurate feedback, and then require lot of skill with labor. So these and all will be the disadvantages. And then, so what are the various techniques that are available for collecting the primary data? Let's see one by one here. So first one is interview. So the interview may be which may be in the form of direct interview, or it may be indirect interview here. And then, so the next technique will be schedule. So schedule is also very important for collecting the primary data. And then questionnaire survey. So questionnaire surveys and other techniques where can able to collect the primary data, and then focus group discussions, and then community forums and public hearings. So where there's some politicals are going to be give some speeches, right, about regarding the public purposes. So that one also considered as a primary data. And then observation. So the observation what we're going to do in experiments, that one also be considered as a primary data collection technique also. And then various case studies also going to be considered, and then the key informants that should be done in the interview, that one also be considered as a primary data. And then internet, emails and SMS also going to be considered as a primary data here. So what are the various techniques that are available for the primary data? So the primary data will be techniques will be interview. So the interview may be either a direct interview or it may be indirect interview. And then schedule. So schedule is also very important while collecting the primary data. So proper schedule is, without the specific schedule we are unable to collect this primary data. That maybe becomes a secondary data also. And then questionnaire survey. So the questionnaire survey should also be considered as data collection technique for the primary data. And focus group discussion. So some group discussions is going on, right? So in this one, some major topics they're going to be discussed, and that should be the primary, or it may be secondary also. But most of the time, you can able to take it as a primary thing. Community forums, the information what I get it from community forums should also be considered as a primary data. And then public hearing speeches. So that one is also be considered as primary data. And then observation, so observation what we did in research analysis as well as in experiments, so that and all should also be considered as a primary data. And then case studies, so case studies also very important, so various applications should also be considered as primary data. And the key informants interviews, and then internet emails also. So let's see one by one. So direct personal observation. So direct personal observations means that here the data is going to be collected by the investigator personally in this one. So he or she must be a keen observer. So the data which is going to be collected by the investigator should be treated as a primary data. And then the investigator who may be a person, or it may be whatever it is, so that person should be a keen observer. And he and she ask or cross examines the information and collects the necessary information. So the observer has to ask some questions and cross examines the information and collects the necessary information what they needed properly. And then it is the original in character forms, right? So that personal observation is very important and should be considered as a primary data here. And this data is going to be collected by the investigator personally itself, and he has to be in a very keen observer mode. And he and she also cross-examines the information as well as the collection of information also. And he is also the original in character form. Let's see what are the merits and demerits of this direct personal observation. So merits will be original data, and demerits will be it is unsuitable in case of large area. So direct personal observation is unable to do in large groups of people. So that's why it should be considered as a disadvantage. And then merits will be true and reliable data will come, and then but it should be expensive and then time consuming process, right? So the demerits will be true and reliable data, but in case of demerits it should be time expensive and then time consuming process. So it may encouraging responses, so because of their personal approach. So this is another advantage of direct personal observation, and it is also having high degree of accuracy. So this high degree of accuracy also uh, may advantage for the direct personal observation. Similarly, what are the disadvantage of for that one is the collection of information according to the ease of informant, that should be the disadvantage. And then untrained investigator brings the worst results also. So these are some of the disadvantages of direct personal observation. So the merits or advantages for the direct personal observation is that so original data, and then the true and reliable data will come here, and then encouraging response because of the personal approach is going on here, and then high degree of accuracy is also there. When it comes to demerits, so the unsuitable in large area, so personal information for a large group is impossible one, and it should be expensive and then time consuming process, as well as the untrained investigator brings the worst results, that is the another disadvantage. So if I'm going to conduct some direct personal interviews, then definitely the investigator should be trained one. So if the investigator is not an untrained one, so definitely you can able to get the worst results. And then the collection of information according to the ease of informant is also brings as a disadvantage. Next one is that next technical review will be that indirect oral interview. So previous one is direct oral interview, and next one is that indirect oral interview. So in this one, so the investigator approaches the witness or third parties so who are in touch with the informant. So right, so the indirect oral will be interview. So the investigator is able to approach the witness as well as for the third parties who are in touch with the informant. And the enumerator interviews the people so who are directly or indirectly connected with the problem under the study. So the here the enumerator will be there which can able to conduct some interviews for the people so who are directly or indirectly communicate with the problem under this study. And generally, this method is going to be employed by different inquiry committees and commissions also. So this interview, so what is the information what I collected from the indirect oral interview? So this method is going to be, and the results what is produced by this method is going to be undergone by the different inquiry committees and then commissions also. Example, the police department generally adopt this method actually to get the clues of the thefts, riots, and murders, etc. So this is the uh, example of in the indirect oral interview here. So the indirect oral interview is that so the investigator approaches the witness towards it or through to the third parties so who are in touch with the informant, and then here enumerator will be there which can able to conduct some interviews for the people so who are indirectly or indirectly connected for the problem under study. And this method is going to be employed by the different inquiry committees and commissions. So this is the indirect one, and then the police department generally adopt this method to get clues for the thefts and the riots and murders, etc. And then next one is we will see about what are the merits and demerits of indirect oral interview. So the merits will be simple and convenient one, and then it saves the time, money, and the labor also when compared to the direct interview, and then useful in investigation of large area, and then adequate information can be had. And then the demerits will be information cannot be relied as an absence of direct contact. So the information what we're getting, so that should be absent sometimes because of direct contact. And then next disadvantages is that so the interview will be an improper man with which spoils the results also. So as the interview is going to be conducted by the improper person, so to that the results what I'm getting will be spoiled. And then to get the real data, so a sufficient number of people are going to be interviewed here, that is also a disadvantage one. And then careless attitude of information affects the degree of the accuracy. So this also be considered as a disadvantage of indirect oral interview. So the merits of the indirect oral interview will be that so simple and then convenient one, and then so the major advantage of this method is saves the time, money, and then labor, right? And then so this method also going to be useful in investigation for a large group of area when compared to the direct oral interview. And then adequate information can be on and only. When comes to demerits, so the information cannot be relied as a absence of direct contact, because of that some other person is going to be get this information, right? And then the interview with the improper man will be spoil the results, as some other person is going to be get the results, right? Or he may be in a position to spoil the results also. And then in order to get the real data, a sufficient number of people are to be interviewed, and then the careless attitude of information affects the degree of accuracy also. And the next one is that second one, information through agencies. So the local agents or correspondents will be appointed, and they collect the information and transmit to the office of the person, right? So the local agents or correspondents will be there which is going to be appointed, and then they are going to collect the information and transmit it to the office of the person that should the information through agencies. And they also do according to their own ways and then own taste, and then which is also going to be adopted by the newspapers and agencies, etc. And then the informants are generally called as correspondents, and then this method is also suitable in those cases where the information is to be obtained at regular interval from the wide area. So these are all the information that one I'm going to get through the agencies, right? So the local agents or correspondents will be appointed, and they should be collect the information and transmit the office person, and they can able to do according to their own ways and tastes, and then which is going to be adopted by the newspapers and agencies, and then the informants are going to be generally called as a correspondents here, and suitable in those cases where the information is going to be obtained from the regular interviews from the wide area. And then when it comes to see what are the merits and demerits of this method. So when it comes to advantages, so the extensive information can be on hand, and then it is the most cheap and then economical method, and then it should also be a speedy information and getting, and it is also useful where the information is needed regularly, right? So these are the merits. So extensive information can able to get through this method, and then it is the most cheap and economical method, and then it should be very speedy information can also be obtained, and then it is also useful when the information is needed regularly. And demerits is that, so the information may be biased is the first one, and degree of accuracy cannot be maintained, and informity cannot be maintained, and data may not be original one. So these are the various demerits of this method. So the demerits will be the information may be biased, and then the degree of accuracy cannot be maintained here, and uniformity cannot be maintained here, and data may not be in original one. So these are the various disadvantages of that uh, of this method. So the bias means not saving properly, and degree of accuracy also cannot be maintained here, and then uniformity cannot be maintained in a proper way, and then data may not be original also. And next one is that next technique where can able to collect the primary data is that mailed questionnaires. So the questionnaires is sent to the respondents. They are blank spaces for the answer, and then a covering letter is also sent along with the questionnaire, and then the requesting the respondent to extend their full cooperation. So which is going to be adopted by the researcher works, and then private individuals, and the non-officials, agencies, and government, and then appropriate in cases where the informants are spread over a wide area. So these are the where we can able to get the primary data through the mailed questionnaire. So the questionnaire, what I'm going to do that is the questionnaire is able to send to respondents their blank spaces for the answer here, so that the respondent can able to answer the questionnaires which is going to be raised by the questionnaire, and the covering letter is also sent along with the questionnaire, and then requesting the respondent to extend their full cooperation. And this is another way, and then mainly this type of method is going to be adopted by the research workers, private individuals, and non-official agencies, and then governments also. Then appropriate in cases where the information are spread over a wide area also. And then let's see what are the advantages and disadvantages of this method. So the advantages will be, of all methods, the mailed questionnaire is the most economical one, and then it cannot be widely used. So where when the area of investigation is large, and then it also saves money, labor, and time also. So these are the advantages of the mailed questionnaire. So the mailed questionnaire is that, so where is the most economical method, and then which is not, it is going to be used even the area of investigation is large also. So the mailed question mails, right, you can able to communicate it, so that it can able to saves the money, labor, and time also. When it comes to demerits, So these method cannot be sure about the accuracy and reliability of the data, since we are getting the data through mails, right? So some people may will give some wrong answers, some people may give some missing data on door. So due to that, what we are getting, so the data cannot be accurate one and reliable one, and there is a long delay in receiving the questionnaire also, since some people may able to respond the mail after 2 days or 3 days. So that this should be considered as a disadvantage. And next one is that the data collection through schedules. So through this we can able to uh, collect the primary data also. This is another way of technique, and this technique also very similar to the questionnaire method. So which is almost all similar to the questionnaire method. And the major differences is that the schedule is going to be filled by the enumerator, who is specially appointed for the purpose. So there should be a separate enumerator is going to maintain here. So based on the appointment of that one, you can able to collect the data. So the enumerator, what the enumerator will do, so the enumerator will goes to the respondent and ask them the questions from the performer in the order list and record the responses in the space provided. So what the enumerator will do that is that the enumerator will go to the respondent and frequently ask the questions from the performer what is having in that one, and then should able to record the responses in the space what they provided there. And then the enumerators must be trained in the administering the schedule also. So these are the under method. So it should be almost all similar to the questionnaire, and major difference is that a schedule is going to be filled by enumerator, which is going to be specially appointed for this purpose, for the collecting the data, and the enumerator will go to the respondent, which should also ask them the questionnaires from the performer in the order list and record the responses in the space provided. And then enumerators must be trained in administering the schedule also. And next one is that survey. So survey is another method which can able to collect the primary data, and detailed study of geographical area is needed to gather the data, and then attitudes also important, and then impressions, and then opinions, and then statistical level, etc., by polling a section of the population here. So the detailed study of geographical area to gather data, attitude, impressions, opinions, and the satisfaction level is going to be done by polling a section of the population. So what are different types of surveys where you can able to conduct here is census survey is the one, and then continuous survey is the other one, and ad hoc survey is the third one. So what these are the several ways we can able to conduct the survey here. So census survey means conducted regularly at the large interval of time. So that should be census survey. And then conducted continuous survey means which is going to be conducted regularly and then frequently here. Ad hoc survey is that, so which is going to be conducted at specific times for a specific need, and then as and when is required. So right, so the detailed survey of geographical areas is to gather the data as well as attitude, impressions, opinions also. There are different types of surveys available, like census survey, continuous survey, and ad hoc survey. So the census survey is nothing but which is going to be conducted regularly at large interval of time. So that should be census survey. Suppose if the survey is going continuous survey is the second one, right? So this one is going to be conducted and then regularly more, and then frequently, very frequently, less frequently when compared to that of census survey. And then third one is that ad hoc survey. So ad hoc survey is another one which can able to conduct the interviews at specific times, not for the long period of running. So this one also will be used as on when it is going to be required here. Let's see the merits and demerits of this method. So the major advantage of this method is that we can able to cover a large population. So that is the first advantage of this one, and the method is also very expensive, and due to information is what we are getting is accurate, right? So that should be the another advantage of this method. And then when it comes to disadvantages, so disadvantage means on small scale the survey is going to be avoided, right? And then it should be also the time consuming process, and the information what you are going to penetrating is to be done very deeply, has to be done, is not done deeply. And then the researcher must have a very good knowledge in order to implement this method. So these are the should be considered as a disadvantages. So the merits will be cover large population and then less expensive one, and then information is very accurate one. It should be the advantages of this method. And then when it comes to disadvantages, the disadvantage should be small scale survey is avoided this method, and then it should be also time consuming process, and the information does not penetrate deeply, and then the researcher must should have very good knowledge for implementing this method. Let's see last one. That one should be a case study. So case study means so it is also a method of comprehensive study of social unit. So which may be a person, a family, or institution, or organization, or a community, right? So it is the method of comprehensively study of the social unit, so which is going to be undergone by a person or a people or institution or organization or a community. Let's see that what are the advantages of the disadvantages of this method. So the advantages should be direct personal direct behavioral study is the advantage, and then real and personal experience record is another advantage, and which makes the possible study of the social change also, and then which can able to increase analysis ability and then skills. So this is the this and all will be the various advantages of this method. And when comes to disadvantages, so one case almost all it is different from the other method, and personal bias makes this method as a drawback one. And then this method is also be going to be used in a very left limit sphere, right? And then it should also consumes more time and money. So this is the another disadvantage. So the case study is very good one, but even it is having some advantages and disadvantages also. So the advantages will be direct behavioral study will be considered, and then personal experience record will be considered. So make the possible study of the social change and increase analysis ability, and then skills also be done. When it comes to demerits, so one of the most difficult method from the other one, and then personal bias is going to be done, and then this method is going to be used in very less limit sphere and more time and money consuming process. And the next method is that focus group discussion. So in focus group discussion what we are going to see is, so this method is going to be useful when we are going to further explore the topic, and then we should also provide a broader understanding of why the target people may behave or think in a practical particular way, right? So whenever this method will give provide an understanding of why the target people may behave or think in a particular way. And then this method also going to be assist in determining the reason of attitudes and then beliefs also. And then this one is going to be converted so with a small of target groups only, and is to be used to stimulate the discussion and gain greater insights. So this and all the information regarding group discussion. So this method is going to be used whenever we have to further explore a topic, and then we are able to provide a broader view of the target group and all in a particular way, then this method is the suitable one. And this group discussion also going to be assist in determining the reason for attitudes and then beliefs also, and then this one is going to be conducted with a small sample of target group, and then this one is going to be used to simulate discussion and gain greater insights. Let's see the merits and demerits of this focus group discussion. See, the advantages of this method is that it is useful when exploring cultural values and healthy beliefs, and it is going to be used to explore the complex issues, and then it can also be used to develop hypotheses for the further research, and then also does not require any participant to be literate. So these are the various advantages of this focus discussion group. So the advantages should be useful whenever we're going to explore the cultural values and then health beliefs, and it is also going to be used to be explore the complex issues, and it is also going to be used to develop a hypothesis for the further research, and it does not require any participant to be literate here. And the next one is that disadvantages. So what are the disadvantages of this method? So lack of privacy and anonymity is the major disadvantage, and then it is also be a potential for the risk of group thinking, and then there is also potential for the group to be dominated by one or two people, and then the group leader needs to be skilled at conducting focus groups, dealing with conflict, and drawing out passive participants. And time consuming also very drawback of this method, right? So the lack of privacy is there, and then the potential for the risk of group thinking, and then potential for the group should be dominated by one or two people, and then the group leader needs to be skilled, otherwise he is in a position to conduct this group discussion while focus on the various groups, and is going to be dealing with conflicts and drawing out the passive participants as well, and then it should be time consuming to conduct and then analyze. Thank you.
Like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.